What is up, everybody? My name is Logan Stroh, and welcome to CTF Stroh Talks Football. Today, I'm going to be giving you guys my Week 11 NFL reactions. There's a whole lot to talk about, so let's get right into it. Don't forget to comment, like, subscribe, turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of my videos whenever I post. With all that out of the way, let's get started. The first game we had was Thursday Night Football. We had the Washington Commanders at the Philadelphia Eagles, and this was a pretty solid game to start off the week. Looking at the Commanders here, Jayden Daniels played all right, 22 for 32, 191 yards, 1 touchdown, only 1 pick. Rushing was led by Bijan Robinson Jr. with 16 carries for 63 yards and a touchdown. And then receiving was led by Austin Ekeler with 8 receptions for 89 yards, not a single score, but Zach Ertz had the receiving touchdown. And then the defense in total only had a total of 2 sacks, which both of them are by Frankie Lavue. Then looking at the Eagles here, even though Jalen Hurts did not throw a single touchdown, he was pretty clean, 18 for 28, 221 yards, not throwing a single turnover. Saquon was all over the place with rushing, 26 carries for 146 yards, 2 touchdowns, and Jalen Hurts also had a rushing touchdown on the board. Receiving was pretty quiet, but it was led by A.J. Brown, who had 5 receptions for 65 yards, and then Dallas Goedert had 5 receptions for 61 yards. And then the Eagles defense had a total of 3 sacks and 1 interception, that interception being by Reed Blankenship. So yeah, pretty solid game by both of these teams, but the Eagles did come up on top. And just like I predicted in my predictions, when these teams face each other again in Washington, the Commanders will win that one. That is my prediction here. Next game we got is the Las Vegas Raiders at the Miami Dolphins, and this was an absolute beatdown. This was all Miami, but first off, let's look at the Raiders here. Looking at Gardner Minshew here, he actually did not play that bad of a game. 30 for 43, 282 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, only 1 pick. Rushing was absolutely atrocious, with the leading rusher being Jakobi Meyers for 1 carry for 20 yards. That must have just been like a jet sweep or something. And then receiving was led by Brock Bowers with 13 receptions for 126 yards and a touchdown. Continues to be one of the best tight ends in football right now as a rookie. And then Amir Abdullah has a receiving touchdown as well. And then looking at the Raiders defense, they are highlighted to 2 sacks on the day. Now looking at the Dolphins here, Tua did play a really great game. 28 for 36, 288 yards, 3 touchdowns, not a single turnover. Rushing was led by Devon Achane with 17 carries for 73 yards and a touchdown. And then receiving was led by Jonnu Smith with 6 receptions, 101 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Wow. And then Tyreek Hill having 7 receptions for 61 yards and a touchdown. And then the Dolphins defense had a total of 3 sacks and an interception, that interception being by Jalen Ramsey. So the Dolphins come out with probably their most convincing win so far this season, and they're looking pretty decent right now, even though at 4-6. Next game we got is the Cleveland Browns at the New Orleans Saints, and I was completely wrong about this game. I said the Browns were going to win this one, but not only did we win, but we beat the shit out of Cleveland. Looking at the Browns here, Jameis actually played a fantastic game, like I predicted. 30 for 46, 395 yards, almost 400 yards, and 2 touchdowns, not turning the ball over not a single time. Rushing was led by Nick Chubb for 11 carries, 50 yards, not a single score. He's been pretty quiet ever since he came back, but you can't really expect big things out of him after that injury. And then receiving was led by Jerry Jeudy with 6 receptions, 142 yards, and a touchdown. And then Elijah Moore had 6 receptions for 66 yards and a touchdown. And then the Browns defense is highlighted by 1 sack and only 1 pick, that pick being by Denzel Ward, finally. Looking at the Saints here, Derek Carr actually played surprisingly a clean game. 21 for 27, 248 yards, 2 touchdowns, not a single turnover, other than Taysom Hill throwing the ball once and throwing a pick. But that's not really going to mean much when you see the rest of his stats. Because Taysom Hill was absolutely electric in this game. Rushing, he led with 7 carries, 138 yards, and 3 touchdowns. He had a career game. Also, note Alvin Kamara had 16 carries for 67 yards. And then receiving was led by MVS with 2 receptions, 87 yards, and a touchdown. But most of those receiving yards was because of a big play he had. Without that, he wouldn't have done much. And then Juwan Johnson also had a receiving touchdown. I don't even know why I started right there. Jesus. And then the Saints defense had a total of 3 sacks on the day. So the Saints finally have their first convincing win in weeks ever since they played the Cowboys. And wow, Rizzy's actually doing pretty solid as a coach right now. Like, I don't know what we're going to do, but it's their decision to make. Next game we got is the Colts at the Jets, and why do the Colts play down the competition so much? Like, why, man? They sometimes look like a bottom team, and then they can come out to win, and they look still solid. Like, I don't get it. The Colts are a weird team. Looking at the Jets here, Aaron Rodgers was okay. 22 for 29, 184 yards and 2 touchdowns. Rushing was led by Breece Hall with 16 carries for 78 yards and a touchdown. And then receiving was led by Devontae Adams with 6 receptions, 72 yards, and no score. But Breece Hall had a receiving touchdown, and Kenny Yoloff has a receiving touchdown. I don't think I even pronounced that right. And then looking at the Jets defense, they had a total of 2 sacks on the day. Looking at the Colts here, Anthony Richardson was 20 for 30, 272 yards, 1 touchdown, and shockingly did not turn over the ball one time. Despite missing a bunch of throws, he did not turn over the ball. That's pretty good. Rushing was led by Jonathan Taylor, which production-wise was not that good. 24 carries for 57 yards, not a single score. But Anthony Richardson did have 2 rushing touchdowns. And then receiving was led by Josh Downs with 5 receptions, 84 yards, and a touchdown. And then looking at the Colts defense, they had a total of 3 sacks on the day. So the Colts barely sneaked by the Jets to get the win here, but the Jets' playoff hopes are looking very thin right now. Next game we got is the Vikings at the Titans, and I almost predicted this game right on the dot, like 1 point away from predicting this game right on the dot. Looking at the Titans here, Will Levis did not play a great game. 17 for 31, 295 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 pick. Rushing was awful, led by Will Levis with only 7 carries, 18 yards. The fact that Will Levis led rushing this week is embarrassing for Tony Pollard or Tajay Spears. And then receiving was led by Nick Westbrook-Akeen with 2 receptions, 117 yards, and a touchdown. And then looking at the Titans defense, they had a total of 2 sacks on the day. Looking at the Vikings here, Sam Darnold played a clean game, 20 for 32, 246 yards, and 2 touchdowns, not a single pick. Rushing was also pretty bad for the Vikings, but Aaron Jones did end up getting hurt later in the game, 15 carries for 39 yards. Once again, he did get hurt later, so I can't put too much blame on him. Also to note that Sam Darnold did also have a rushing touchdown. And then receiving was led by Justin Jefferson with 6 receptions, 81 yards, not a single score. But Jordan Addison had 3 receptions for 61 yards and a touchdown. And then Cam Akers had a receiving touchdown. Wow, I haven't heard his name for forever. And then looking at the Vikings defense, they had a total of 5 sacks and an interception being by Harrison Smith. So good game by the Vikings, and they remain one of the best teams in the NFC. Next game we got is the Green Bay Packers at the Chicago Bears, and wow, this was a crazy game at the end. I can't show the play at the end because of reasons, but it was crazy. You're going to have to check it out for yourself. Looking at the Bears here, Caleb Williams was kind of 23 for 31, 231 yards, not a single touchdown or pick. Rushing was led by DeAndre Swift with 14 carries, 71 yards, and a touchdown. Rashawn Johnson also had a rushing touchdown. And then receiving was led by Rome Odunze with 6 receptions, 65 yards on a single score. And then looking at the Bears defense, they had a total of 1 sack and 1 pick on the day. Looking at the Packers here, Jordan Love was really not that good. Like, stats might look like he had a decent game, but he really did not. 13 for 17, 261 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. Rushing was led by Josh Jacobs with 18 carries for 76 yards and a touchdown. Jordan Love also had a rushing touchdown. I'll tell you who did have a fantastic game. Christian Watson leading receiving with 4 receptions, 150 yards. He finally made a name out of himself this year, I feel like. Like, this was his breakout game right here. Jaden Reed also had a receiving touchdown to note as well. And then the Packers defense had a total of 3 sacks on the day. So yeah, pretty close, crazy game at the end. It came down to a blocked field goal. And wow, it was just like the Chiefs and Broncos, except this one was probably more heartbreaking. But I'm not going to give really the Packers a pass, because if you want to name a team that plays down the competition, this is the textbook definition right here. Like, if they play like this in the playoffs, they're getting one and done. But yep, the Chicago Bears are still owned by the team of Green Bay, Wisconsin. Next game we got is the Jacksonville Jaguars at the Detroit Lions, and this is exactly how I predicted it. I knew the Jaguars were going to be miserable, and it actually ended up being worse than what I predicted. Looking at the Jaguars, Mac Jones made a second start due to Trevor Lawrence being out again with injury. He did not do that great. 17 for 29, 138 yards, and no touchdowns and 1 pick. Rushing was led by Travis Etienne, who still continues to be terrible this year. 12 carries for 27 yards, not a single score. And then receiving was led by Brian Thomas Jr. with 5 receptions, 82 yards, not a single score. But he still continues to make something out of nothing. And then looking at the Jaguars defense, they did not do anything. Looking at the Lions here, Jared Goff had a great game after that horrible game he had last week, so a good redemption game. 24 for 29, 412 yards, and 4 touchdowns, not a single turnover. Rushing was led by David Montgomery with 15 carries, 75 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And also to note, Jahmyr Gibbs had 11 carries for 69 yards and a touchdown. And then receiving was led by Amon-Ra St. Brown with 11 carries, 161 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Jameson Williams also having 4 receptions, 124 yards, and a touchdown. They went ballistic this week. And also Brock Wright had a receiving touchdown as well. And then looking at the Lions here, they had a total of 1 sack and 1 pick on the day. It might not sound much, but I knew the Lions offense was going to be good. But one thing I'm shocked with is their defense. Like, they look pretty damn good this year. Like, compared to the last couple of years, they've made some improvements. So, yep, the Lions got a dominating win, and they still remain one of the best teams in the NFL. Next game we got is the Los Angeles Rams versus the New England Patriots, and this was surprisingly a good game. Looking at the Patriots here, Drake May had a pretty good game, 30 for 40, 282 yards, 2 touchdowns, only 1 pick. Rushing was led by Ramondre Stevenson with 20 carries, 73 yards, not a single touchdown, but he was pretty good. And then receiving was led by Kendrick Bourne with 5 receptions, 70 yards, and a touchdown. And then looking at the Patriots defense, they really did not do much, not a single sack or pick on the game. Looking at the Rams here, Matthew Stafford had a great game, 18 for 27, 295 yards, and 4 touchdowns, not a single turnover. Rushing was led by Kyren Williams with 15 carries, 86 yards, not a single touchdown. And then receiving was led by Puka Nacua with 7 receptions, 123 yards, and a touchdown. Cooper Kupp had 6 receptions, 106 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And then Colby Parkinson had a receiving touchdown. And then the Rams defense had a total of 3 sacks and 1 pick on the day. So the Rams finally got a good win, especially after that embarrassing game last week. So it's good to see them finally starting to play some good ball again. Next game we got is the Baltimore Ravens at the Pittsburgh Steelers. And the Steelers won as I predicted, but it's not as much as I thought. Looking at the Ravens here, Lamar, not his best game. 16 for 33, 207 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. Rushing was led by Derrick Henry with 13 carries, 65 yards, and a touchdown. And then receiving is led by Isaiah Likely with 4 receptions, 75 yards, not a single score. But Zay Flowers did have a receiving touchdown on the day. And then the Ravens defense had a total of 4 sacks and 1 pick on the day. And then looking at the Steelers here, Russell Wilson played okay, 23 for 36, 205 yards, no touchdowns, but a pick. Rushing was led by Najee Harris with 18 carries, 63 yards, and no touchdowns from any running back. And then receiving was led by George Pickens with 8 receptions, 89 yards, and not a single touchdown from receiving. So now you're asking yourself, how did the Steelers get 18 points? And this is how. Chris Boswell kicked all 18 of their points. All of their points came from field goals. Their offense was embarrassing this week, but they still got the win. So that's not really the biggest deal, but it's still embarrassing that it was all their kicker. And then looking at the Steelers defense, they had a total of 2 sacks and 1 pick on the day. So yeah, not the prettiest win at all, but the Steelers still got the win, and they are now 8-2 leading the division. Next game we got is the Seattle Seahawks at the San Francisco 49ers, and the Niners blow another game. Like, they're becoming the Falcons right now, dude. Looking at the Niners here, Brock Purdy played a decently Purdy game, 21 for 28, 159 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. Rushing was led by CMC with 19 carries, 79 yards, on a single score. He continues to be a little underwhelming. And then Brock Purdy had a rushing touchdown. And then receiving was led by Juwan Jennings with 10 receptions, 91 yards, and a touchdown. And then looking at the Niners defense, they had a total of 4 sacks and 1 pick on the day. And then looking at Seattle here, Geno Smith played a decent game, 25 for 32, 221 yards, no touchdowns, but a pick. Looking at rushing, it was pretty lousy, but it was led by Kenneth Walker, 14 carries, 54 yards, and a touchdown. Geno Smith also had a rushing touchdown. And then receiving was led by Jackson Smith-Njigba with 10 receptions, 110 yards, and not a single score. And then looking at the Seahawks defense, they had a total of 2 sacks and 1 pick on the day. So the Niners once again lose a game that they should have won, and the Niners have lost to all 3 of their division rivals this year. Like, embarrassing compared to last year and the year before. Like, you got to ask yourself, it's starting to become a coaching problem too. Like, not just because, like, the defense sucks right now, their special teams suck right now, their offense can't get anything going. Like, you got to ask yourself, it's got to be coaching. Tick, tick, Shanahan, tick, tick. Next game we got is the Falcons at the Broncos, and the Broncos put up a very dominating win. Looking at the Falcons here, Kirk Cousins did not play a great game, and he ended up getting benched later. He was 18 for 27, 173 yards, no touchdowns, and a pick. Michael Penix Jr. came in later, was 2 for 4, and only threw for 24 yards. Rushing was awful, but it was led by Bijan Robinson with only 12 carries, 35 yards, not a single score. And then receiving was led by Drake London with 3 receptions for 61 yards and no touchdowns. All 6 of their points were by Younghoe Koo, their kicker, so without them, they would have laid a goose egg in this game. And then looking at the Falcons defense, they only had a total of 1 sack on the day. I don't know another team that plays down the competition this much with this loaded of a roster, other than the team I talked about earlier. Looking at the Broncos here, Bo Nix probably just had his breakout game. 28 for 33, 307 yards, 4 touchdowns, not a single turnover. He played fantastic. Rushing was led by Javonte Williams with 9 carries for 59 yards and a touchdown. And then receiving was led by Courtland Sutton with 7 receptions, 78 yards, no touchdown. Jordan Humphrey had a receiving touchdown. Marvin Mims Jr. had a receiving touchdown. And Troy Franklin had a receiving touchdown, as well as Nate Atkins. Bo Nix gave the ball to everybody. That's great to see as a rookie. And then looking at the Broncos defense, they had a total of 4 sacks and an interception on the day. So yeah, great game by the Broncos, and I don't even know what to say about Atlanta. They're looking embarrassing right now. If they keep playing like this, they're going to be one and done in the playoffs. This is the thoughts right now, because it's getting closer to postseason time. What the hell, dude? It felt like week 1 last week, man. This season's going by way too quick. Next game we got is the Kansas City Chiefs at the Buffalo Bills, and I can finally sleep happy. The Bills won. The Chiefs finally lost, and knowing that the Chiefs are not going to have an undefeated season, I can finally sleep happy. Life hasn't been any happier. Looking at the Chiefs here, Patrick Mahomes was okay. 23 for 33, 196 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 2 picks. Rushing was led by Kareem Hunt with 14 carries, 60 yards, not a single score. And then receiving was led by Xavier Worthy with 4 receptions, 61 yards, and a touchdown. Noah Gray had 2 receiving touchdowns, 0 sacks, and only 1 pick on the day. It's nice to see the Chiefs defense not do much. Looking at the Bills here, Josh Allen had a fantastic game. 27 for 40, 262 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. His passing stats don't look fantastic, but if you look at his rushing, and that's what mainly won the Bills the game. He led rushing with 12 carries, 55 yards, and a touchdown. Also to note that James Cook had 2 rushing touchdowns. And then receiving was led by Khalil Shakir with 8 receptions, 70 yards, 0 touchdowns. Curtis Samuel had a receiving touchdown, and Amari Cooper had a really nice one-handed catch. And then looking at the Bills defense, they had a total of 2 sacks and 2 picks on the day. So great game by the Bills, great win. And with the Chiefs losing, the AFC is starting to get really interesting. Next game we got is Sunday Night Football, the Cincinnati Bengals at the Los Angeles Chargers, and this was a great game. It started off with the Chargers dominating in the first half, and then the Bengals came back in the second half. Almost came back, but the Chargers still came up with the win. It was a very entertaining game. Looking at the Bengals here, Joe Burrow was 28 for 50. Not really good for completion attempt ratio, but still 356 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, not a single turnover. It's so frustrating because he's playing some of the best football in his career, but he still can't find a way to win a game. It's getting frustrating. Rushing was led by Chase Brown with 22 carries, 86 yards, not a single touchdown. And then receiving was led by T. Higgins with 9 receptions, 148 yards, and a touchdown. Ja'Marr Chase having 7 receptions for 75 yards and 2 touchdowns. And then looking at the Bengals defense, they had a total of 2 sacks on the day. Looking at the Chargers here, Justin Herbert played pretty good, 17 for 36, 297 yards, 2 touchdowns, not a single turnover. Rushing was led by Justin Herbert with 5 carries, 65 yards, not a single score. J.K. Dobbins did have 2 rushing touchdowns. And then receiving was led by Ladd McConkey with 6 receptions, 123 yards, 0 touchdowns. But Will Dissly had a receiving touchdown, and Quentin Johnson had a receiving touchdown. And then looking at the Chargers defense, they had a total of 3 sacks and no picks on the day. So yep, the Chargers got close to charging, but they've held their charging, and they got the win. And they are now 7-3, having a very impressive season. And then the last game we got was the Houston Texans at the Dallas Cowboys for Monday Night Football. And I almost predicted this game perfectly, too. Like, I knew the Cowboys were going to get beat down. Looking at the Cowboys here, Cooper Rush actually played a decent game for what it's worth. 32 for 55, 354 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. You see Brian Anger's passing stats right there. It's because the first drive, they go 3 and out. They do a fake punt to throw it, and the receiver gets slammed. It was absolutely hilarious. Rushing has always been awful. It still is awful, with Rico Dowdle leading the rushing with 10 carries, 28 yards, no touchdowns. And then receiving was led by CeeDee Lamb with 8 receptions, 93 yards on a single touchdown, but KaVontae Turpin had a receiving touchdown. And then looking at the Cowboys defense, they had a total of 1 sack and 1 pick on the day. And then looking at the Texans here, C.J. Stroud, despite beating down the Cowboys, did not play that great of a game. 23 for 34, 257 yards, 0 touchdowns, only 1 pick. Like, I don't know how C.J. Stroud's playing this bad of football right now. Like, it's 2 different quarterbacks I'm watching from last year to this year. Like, he needs to get his shit together. Rushing was led by Joe Mixon, who had a very good game. 20 carries for 109 yards and 3 touchdowns. He was all over the Cowboys defense. And then receiving was led by a returning Nico Collins with 4 receptions, 54 yards, and not a single score from any receiver because C.J. Stroud cannot hit his receivers sometimes. And then looking at the Texans defense, they had a total of 5 sacks and 1 pick on the day. So the Texans got a very dominating win, and then the Cowboys continue to be winless at home, and they continue to get dominated. I just remembered Week 13 on Thanksgiving, the Cowboys play the Giants at home. If they end up losing to the Giants at home, I'm going to laugh so hard. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys did, don't forget to leave a comment, like, subscribe, turn on notification bell so you don't miss any of my videos whenever I post. With all that said, I'm Logan Sharon. I'll see you next time.